Do
I
the
don't do
thing.
justice. I don't do it justice. Here's Ray doing the thing. It is
All right.
September 30th, 2024, episode 229. We have our friends from Armored Defense on.
You announced them before we announced them. I don't know. How do we I don't know how we're going to recover from that.
This is my razzle dazzle. I'll take constructive feedback at the end.
I like razzle dazzle. Well, good evening, Ray. Good evening, Ray. It's just you.
I have many personalities. You're not done yet. Let's keep going. You have to greet all of them.
It's just you and I for the moment. It's not been a week since we've talked. We've talked more recent than that, but in the last week, as part of your role at Microsoft, or I don't care, you can talk about your personal life if you'd like. Just be very careful. We do have followers, no telling how deeply they follow us. But what have you done in the last week? I think I heard something about, and I'll talk about Ignite here in a minute, but I think I heard something about Defender Experts in the past week or something. What are you doing with that?
What am I doing? I am working with my fellow Defender Experts and protecting our customers across the globe. And we're putting on, our Halloween special for the Brett Hunt panel. So that's super exciting. Going to talk about some emergent threats. Love for it to be interactive. So folks, get your questions ready for the team. And we're also putting together a series. Hopefully we can get it as like a webinar, maybe monthly. So that's really exciting stuff because folks are really passionate and want to share what they're doing and educate the community broadly. So super cool. Traveled to headquarters last week. Met up with the team, learned some cool things, trying to keep up with my schoolwork. I'm trying to finish my third master's degree. Nobody has any mercy with me. They're like, we don't care you're tumor lady. We don't care that you got a full-time job and you got a kid and you got a divorce. Like, get your schoolwork done. And I'm like, I'm trying. So, Callie, work with me. Just a little temperamental, but I'll get it together. But that's what I've been working on. What about you, Rod?
Well, you mentioned a couple of things I thought just to highlight, just so people are super aware. First off, you mentioned our Halloween episode. That's actually on October 30th.
Yes. It's a misnomer to call it the Halloween episode when it's not on Halloween, but it's Halloween adjacent.
Well, I like that. Yeah, that commercial is hilarious. It's our Halloween special. So you could literally have that. We could have our Halloween special on January 1st. And it's still not Halloween. It's the Halloween special.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's going to be, and that's an extra episode that week. People should be aware. We have a Monday episode, and this is on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's October 30th is on Wednesday. So it's a special episode. It really is special.
I had to pull teeth with the team. This is not an inside job here. Everyone's like, oh, let's put on a bonus. No, they're like, do people really want to hear about it? Like, it's like, yes, we do. So very, very, very much excited for it. And it is a bonus special. So folks, share your questions, reach out to us. We'll make sure that we cover the content or any emergent trends that you want for a deep dive on.
And if I'm guessing correctly, if I remember our discussion, there may be costumes.
Yes, that was part of the acceptance criteria that you
We're having a Halloween special, right?
Yes, that was.
So we just have to see what everyone is dressed as. I think we should keep it from each other. You know what we did one year? I don't know if you saw this episode. Brody, myself, we got together and hyped up the Halloween special where we're all going to wear costumes, but we didn't let Edward know that we really weren't.
Oh, I did not catch that episode, but now I feel like I do. What did he dress up as?
You have to. He dressed up as a ninja. Nobody else dressed up.
Right. No, I got that. That's hazing. That's not nice.
I just want to make sure. I'm pretty proud of it. I just want to put that out.
This is workplace bullying. This is the vignette that HR is going to show from how the required training. And in this scene, what should Rod have done with Brody?
Well, obviously there's someone that has to do the thing to create the policy.
Right.
I always wondered, who was that person?
It's you and Brody. It's people.
Who ate the first potato? Who decided just to dig in the ground and eat whatever the first thing they found was. And what, you know,
I feel
'cause
like
most
you were
of
the one. You were the instigator. Brody was an innocent. Like, you convinced him to go along with it. He was under duress.
yeah, well, that was also before Brody had his baby. I think he's a little nicer now. I think he's yeah. But you also mentioned you met with your team at the mothership last week. So you're in the new area. You're probably in the new area of campus, right? Were you in the new area with the new sign and all that stuff?
Well, no, we were there for a tech summit, right? So like we're
Oh.
going over all
I
the
got you.
ins and outs of our Defender stack. But it was nice because I am on a new team per se with a new focus, new specialization. So it was nice to get to see folks in person, like. And then somebody shout out to Christian who helped me. I had no idea where I was going because it was off campus for quite a bit of it, and I did not know anybody there. Like I was trying to follow the thread on my phone, trying to figure out the location, and Christian approached me. He's like, "You're Ray from MSI." I was like, I am. Am I in trouble? Blame Rod. It's Rod's fault. And he's like, no, your team's over there. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is just amazing. So thank you so much, Christian. And it's still Rod's fault.
I'm happy to be the scapegoat for anyone. Yeah. I tell my kids that too. If you don't want to go to somebody's house, they scare you or they're just annoying. Just tell them your dad said no. Right. So you can use me for anything. Anybody listening in, you can use me as a scapegoat.
How are we glossing over if they scare you? I mean, like if they're just annoying, it's like that's unreasonable. But if they scare you, that's like Criminal Minds episode waiting to happen. I don't know.
We were talking about Halloween, so I kind of had to make it fit a little bit. Anyway,
we took creative license.
Back to the team thing, which I think I definitely want to highlight before we bring on our guest, who's no longer a surprise. We will. So I don't even know if you know about this, Ray. So this will be a premiere here, I guess. We have talked in the past couple episodes about the team possibly being together at Microsoft Ignite in November in Chicago. Well, that is now a reality because Ray will be there. We knew that. Ray, you're coming in on Sunday. I'm coming in on Sunday.
You're giving everybody. You are not
Brody. They don't know where we're gonna be. It's just Chicago somewhere. They can find me.
Yes, this is great. Like I know that we got good folks, but Rod, we got to follow our own our leading practices. Is all I'm saying.
It's not like I'm traveling overseas. It's but and then Brody will be coming in on Monday.
Yes.
Right.
And Brody's number
you don't know this. You don't know this. I arranged today for Edward. Thumbs up. Edward is coming. Him and I are actually co-presenting on a session on Copilot for Security during the week, so Edward can attend. So it's going to be all of us. We will do the show from Chicago all together for the first time ever. That's going to be great.
That's incredible. Do we have team uniform that we could wear?
Edward is putting together team T-shirts.
Okay.
Yeah. Remember, he asked today what our sizes were. It wasn't exactly because he was just, trying to get really personal. He wanted to actually create team T-shirts for us.
Not like a Buffalo Bill moment, right? Like it was Goodbye Horses playing. Okay.
So I think Edward is still on tap to join us a little later. We'll see what happens. He's traveling day a little bit. Mondays is kind of a busy day for him these days with his new team and the things that he's doing. So we'll see how that works out. But we do have a guest, and I'm not going to leave it to the audience to guess because they already know at this point. But let's invite to the show our good friends from Armor. All right, so I guess we should go around the horn. Who should we start with? Maybe we do kind of like a lottery, or maybe let's start with David because he has the best initials.
There you go, best initials. Rod, appreciate it, Ray. Thank you. David Fotovich, the Director of Strategic Alliances over here at Armor. And it doesn't get much more exciting than that. So I pass it over to the guy who has all the credentials.
I have a few credentials, but they're stamped retired now. So for whatever that's worth. Miguel Clark, I'm a cybersecurity evangelist for Armor. So GRC and cybersecurity evangelist for Armor.
Welcome, both of you. We had when was our prep call? That was last week, was it not?
week before.
Week before, yeah.
Week before. Boy, time flies. The older
Only
you
when
get,
you're having fun.
yeah. Well, that's what I was going to suggest. Our prep call was like one of the best we've ever had. Not to exclude anyone other guests that might come on the show, but just tell them that you've kind of raised the bar a little bit. They have to, the prep calls need.
Of course.
Super exciting.
Miguel does that everywhere he goes. And then he tells me,
I
shape up.
try, right? Like I want to add value no matter where I am. So that's one of the things that David and I talk a lot about is making sure we add value.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, speaking of value, who would like to give the Armor story before we jump into some questions and stuff like that?
So David is senior to me. I just had my 2-year anniversary. So David has been a little bit with the company a little bit longer. And plus he's got an impressive beard, right? So why would you listen to the guy without the beard for information?
The beard makes it, I guess. Appreciate that. So Armor is a Microsoft security solutions partner. We're also a member of MISA, the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association. MDR company. We provide MDR services along with 2 other key areas for our customers, GRC services, which Miguel talked about, as well as compliant cloud solutions. And what our goal truly is to be between you and the threat. So our solutions are built off of Microsoft product and tool set. We are tightly aligned with the Microsoft products. And our goal with our 24/7 SOC is to ensure that customers have proper level of threat protection along with data security and compliance where it's needed.
Awesome. And I totally appreciate that. We love having Microsoft partners on here with us. I think more so than not, a lot of our guests, we have folks from Microsoft, some of our product teams and things like that, some of the field folks. But then outside of Microsoft, it's always, one of our partners. So we absolutely love partners on the show, but at Microsoft, we love our partners as well. Just of interest, I was talking to some of the MISA management today, in fact, about potentially getting some other folks, or at least even potentially making this show kind of like one of the options for some of the marketing campaigns that they can drive and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. So we appreciate you being on here, and it's folks like you, it's partners like you that actually makes the MISA folks start to think about our show like that. So we totally appreciate it.
No, appreciate it. Appreciated the MISA support in helping us to reach out to you guys, get on the show, and like we said, if it's going to be more MISA members on there, they just have to step up to the plate and make sure that at least the prep call is damn good.
Well, and the more Monty Python references they can throw in, the better. And I should, before we move on, I have to apologize. I responded to that email a second time. So it's interesting for those listening in. We have these prep calls. We determine, what we want to talk about and things like this and kind of banter around some ideas. We received an email today with a kind of reminder of the things we want to talk about today. And then at the very bottom of it was some Monty Python references. My response was, hey, thanks for this. And then I looked at it later because I have to apologize. If you make me page down more than once on an email, you probably lost me. But I paged down closer to the show and I saw that and I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to be geek enough for everybody, and I feel like I didn't respond correctly. So you think, man, this guy.
It was a short email, Rod. It was a short email. There was not.
There were bullet points.
Well, I have a large monitor, so my windows are this big, right? So.
Okay.
I did ask Miguel. I said, so I saw Rod's response. Was that thanks? We'll talk about it, or thanks? I read it and I like it.
You're too ambiguous, Rod. You're too much of a risk management professional. You have to be clearer, okay?
Yeah. I speak Twitterese most of the time anyway. It's short and sweet, efficient. That's why I had to relearn when I talked to ChatGPT. I had to relearn how to ask questions. All that prompting. So what does Armor do from a customer perspective, right? We talk to a lot of partners. They're either doing somewhat consulting work, maybe ISV type situations. What is Armor's value add for customers?
So one of the greatest things that we can do for our customers is first meet them where they are in their security journey. A lot of companies will come out and say, "Hey, you need threat protection, you need MDR, you need this," and it's a silver bullet type of fix that they're trying to sell. What we're trying to operate under is the fact that our customers need to understand what they're protecting first, and then go about figuring out how to protect it. And the way Miguel puts it, I like, is we need to discuss tool sets, skill sets, and mindsets. And from that perspective, the components that we're going to deliver are going to meet them in their journey where they are, help them to get to a level of understanding their risk, understanding what to measure, understanding what to protect, and then building out a plan and going out and supporting them and protecting those key points of interest that they have in that business, the crown jewels. And so from there, we do go in and deploy Microsoft Defender. We do go in and deploy Microsoft Sentinel in their suite, and we go make sure that it's configured properly. I think that's one of the biggest keys that a lot of the customers that we've come up against is like, "Hey, we did it, we got it. It's turned on, got that far, but let's make sure that it's doing what you need it to do." And then we'll help and support them in monitoring it through our SOC services. So it's a full suite. And then on Miguel's part with the GRC services, do they need SOC readiness assessments? Do they need ISO readiness assessments? Do they need an understanding of how to talk to the business around cybersecurity and be able to paint a picture that will support the spend that they're trying to utilize?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, just thinking about that response, thing that I'm most curious about, right, is, and I see this with customers, but, from your perspective, working with the customers that you work with, what do you find? You talked about the skill sets, mindsets, and you kind of tackle these issues where the customer is. Where do you find your entry point is? Where do you find that customers have the least amount of knowledge? You talk about the configuration stuff. That's probably one of them. But like I said, from that entry point, where do you find that customers actually need that the most?
So for me, I approach the problem backwards, right? So David tells you the way that everything should go, you're moving forward. And then I approach it in reverse, right? So you start thinking about most organizations are compliant when they're breached, right? They have all the tools that are in place and somebody looked at their security plan and thought it was okay. So now I start to think about what went wrong. And those what responses did they need to have in place? So I'm thinking about having a post-breach conversation pre-breach. It's not the same for every customer, right? You start to think about a diagnosis of any sort, and there's usually medication and behavior change that's required. And so this is kind of what we're trying to do in cybersecurity, except for the entire cybersecurity industry is only interested in the medication, right? So, that's the only thing. It's like, hey, I got something for you, right? Hey, you need to lose some weight. So I don't want you to diet. I don't want you to work out. You need Ozempic, right? Like that's what you need, and that's all you need. And so, this is kind of where we are in the industry, is really looking at the tools, services, and then compliance tends to only look to see if those tools are present and doesn't really look at how those things function. Yeah. So now I'm thinking about how do these things function and what do successful teams do, or highly performing successful teams do. And it's always some type of behavior change that's required. So I'm interested in, all right, after we've detected something and we notify, who are we notifying? And are they prepared for what we're going to tell them when they answer the phone or they answer that email? So that's what I mean when I'm thinking about the skill set piece of this. And the mindset is we're on the cybersecurity side of the house, so we're used to threats. That's an everyday environment for us. Nothing new about that. It's another day that ends in the letter Y. No big deal. This is probably going to be the most significant thing that an organization is going to have to deal with when they see it. So how do we impart that mindset, that seriousness, and then, start asking, what do you want to have done if you're going to be breached on Friday? What do you do? What are you spending Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday doing? Right? Like, and then okay, if you know that, how similar is that to what you're currently doing from a cybersecurity hygienes or practices? standpoint. So while I have a technical background, I tend not to talk about these things in a technical way because the technical people usually understand the technical parts, right? And it's everybody else that tends not to see how their behaviors, choices, decisions impact the overall cybersecurity posture and how you expose the organization to risk. So I hope that I didn't throw up too much of a word salad, and I hope I
No.
answered your question.
And so to your point, Miguel, you're essentially sharing this is often a huge change management effort, right? So changing the perspective, inspiring folks to buy into a vision that may be reluctant to. This is typically predicated on trust. So what is your recipe there to bolster trust in your ability to shepherd them through that journey?
Wow, great question. And a difficult one. I didn't have that on my list of questions. I didn't practice an answer.
Yeah.
I try to
Well,
speak.
Copilot, it's not cheating. It's a tool.
You know what? I'm not going to say what I was getting ready to say. So, honesty, being concise about those things. I think it also helps when you understand the problem, right? One of the most frustrating things for people is when you think you know what they're talking about and you really don't, but you're acting like you do. Those things lower trust. We see it all the time, right? There's so many examples of bad behaviors that we can recognize in other people that we don't necessarily see in ourselves as leaders. So that's part of it, right? Here's my problem. Here's your problem as I understand your problem. And I try to simplify it as much as I possibly can. The purpose of a business is to stay in business. It's an infinite game, if you believe Simon Sinek, right? And so that means that you have short-term, you have long-term goals, and you can't make short-term goals that are going to sacrifice what you're trying to do in the long term, right? So that means you need to build a system so that you can be successful. Otherwise, you're being successful on accident, right? Mm-hmm. So then how do you actually bring in a system to do things on purpose, right? That's what GRC is there for. Right. And it's like, oh, that's like the simplest explanation of GRC that I've ever heard. How do you do these things on purpose? How are you successful intentionally? And so I think by demonstrating, hey, I understand how these systems work. I can articulate these things. I can kind of help you. I can simplify it in a way that's easy for you to digest. And then I can give enough examples for people to say, yeah, I recognize some of those behaviors. And better yet, I can take your examples, come up with my own, and then explain it to somebody else who's the decision maker, because your decision makers tend not to be technical folks, right? So we're like, oh, guess what? We deployed Sentinel, right? And, we've configured all the tools, we've done all the tuning, and they're like, okay, I wanted you to have a 10-minute conversation with me in 3 minutes. Right. Yeah. And you're giving me a 20-minute conversation, right? You take a 5 minutes of information, you get super happy. It's something that tech folks love to do. That's how we kind of measure, how good we are in the world. It's like, oh yeah, well, guess what, Ray? Did you know that I know this port, right? Like, I know what this means. And that's what we do going back and forth. Not super useful to decision makers. So to me, if I can provide something beyond just information, I find that to be helpful, right? Most of us will take a little bit of information, we run out, barely, it's not even knowledge at that point in time. We're just regurgitating information. We're not adding any value. So if you can take that data and move it kind of like up that pyramid knowledge and then go into kind of like wisdom and understanding, then people are like, okay, yeah, you really get it. I want you to come and explain that to somebody for me. Yeah. So another long answer. I apologize.
No. I totally appreciate that, because to me, what it sounds like, if I'm going to, again, speaking kind of this Twitterese, is you've built, based on your experiences and your own knowledge and working with other customers, you kind of built this template of how to communicate, which, to be honest, that's probably one of the most essential tools that you have in business, is how you communicate and how best to communicate in those different and varying situations. Is that kind of is that correct? Is that
simplified? Absolutely. You got it down to like 159 characters. Yes.
Yeah.
For
people
sure.
appreciate a good story. People appreciate something that resonates and something that actually means something to them. So I truly appreciate that. I think that's huge that you have the ability to be able to do that. I think, Miguel, one of the things I think we talked about earlier on the other call was maybe some of your background, some things you used to do that might actually help you with that and have helped you build that model or that template.
Yes, I think that's what you were getting at, and I was sidestepping it. So,
Yeah.
yes. So I am a retired special agent, supervisor special agent from the FBI. I have over 23, 24 years of working, being in the cybercrime environment. And so I've watched how cyber has changed, as we called it. Cyber has changed. I worked my first case really 24 years ago in 2000. And so a lot of things have changed, like technology's changed. What we're trying to do has stayed remarkably the same. Right. So, we've got to make sure that the data is available, and that the integrity is there. And, that's, and it's private for the people that it should be, it's your data, and only the people you want looking at it should look at it. And so the basics of that have not changed at all. Technology's changed 100 times since then. And so, when I come right down to that, I'm like, all right, here's what the data is. Let me figure out how much that data is worth to you. We did that all the time in the FBI. When we had a computer intrusion, one of the first things that I needed to understand very early on was, right, how much are we saying this cost? Right. Because if we can't come up with $5,000 worth of costs, then it's not even a federal violation at that point in time, unless, right, somebody's been injured. Right. You've got this access in excess of authority or unauthorized access, but it's almost always predicated on damage. Right. And then after we figure out how much the accounting for that damage is, then we need to think about, is the prosecutor going to prosecute it? We always had more cases that we could work than the prosecutor had resources to prosecute. So that was one of the first things that we did. All right, tell me what you've done. Tell me how much damage the customer, the company has experienced. And then if we can get to a number that's, prosecutor in North Texas or in Washington, D.C. or in New York, and they all have different numbers. We need to see like $100,000 worth of damage, or we might need to see, 50,000. Or if you're in like someplace like New York, like, hey, if it's not $1 million worth of damages, well, then, what do you want me to do?
Well, let's tie this together for just a second, because just kind of circle back, because there's that communication, your communication skills. Obviously, that's experiences and then some learned experiences and stuff like that. And then you talked about your approach, or at least a approach of how to determine how to kind of weigh or balance the cost versus, I think customers are the same way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you get customers to think about that security spend versus, because when you think what security is, right? These security tools that you deploy, people use these, they use them every day. If there's no intrusion for 5 years, they think they've just wasted all this money for 5 years.
Right.
But it's that one thing, right? So how do you relate that? How do you communicate that to customers that, hey, it's okay because you're protected, right?
Well, I tell you, you're just going to make sure I walk out of here with zero secrets left.
There you go.
So one of the things that is kind of my favorite thing to do right now is to talk about the gap between how you value a breach in the early stages of the breach, right? So week 1, week 14, versus the way that it's going to be reported in the annual report or on the board, right? There's always a big gap between the two, right? So you'll have a number. Let's take a recent UK organization that had a breach last year in March, and they said 25 million pounds was approximately what they value the breach at. They'd probably 6-8 weeks after the breach, post breach. That's what they said. We've remediated it. It's done. Then this year, they're like, oh yeah, it's 106.6 million pounds. That's a little different. Right. There's a lot of difference between those two things. So how do you basically, when you're thinking about security, it's easy to think about it in terms of like the 25 million. But it's a completely different conversation when you think about that in terms of 106 million. And, maybe you've got 10,000 employees now that you end up needing to let go. And, there's all these other follow-on costs that never really get attributed to that security solution. So when I focus on what is it that you're trying to protect and how important is that, right? So these are all decisions. It's almost like buying insurance for something, right? You can spend enough money on insurance that where it's more than what you're protecting. And if you have something that's really, really valuable, then you track it. You're interested in that. For example, if you look at a typical breach, and typical breaches are going to be multiple millions of dollars. If I were to turn that into a vehicle that I purchased with my own money, I'm not just going to park it anywhere, right? I'm going to be very interested, right? I'll have cameras, right? I want somebody to watch it. I want somebody to be accountable for that. Well, isn't that what the board is asking of the CEO? Is like, hey, I'm going to park this $25 million car here. I'm going to drive it around, and I want you to make sure that nothing bad happens to that. Well, how much do what's it worth to ensure that? Well, it depends on if you can go and buy another one. Hey, that's fine, right? You pay the insurance, it's no big deal. But what if that's one of a kind? Right? Or what if that information belongs to somebody else and you're driving it around basically as an agent for them, right? You don't own it. And so now you start to think about, well, I might be responsible in some way. So that's one of the things that I talk about, right? Think about the end cost of the breach. Think about all these other things you don't think about, like reputational losses. What about loss of revenues? And then, if you're in any regulated, industry at all, right? People think that these regulations, HIPAA, so on and so forth, that they're there. They provide great protection. It's like, no, they provide a hammer, right? That's what it's there for, to hammer you on the thumbnail and cause you some pain so that the next time there's a breach, you think about that cost. So being conversational about that and start to bring in some of these costs and really focus on why are you doing what it is that you're doing, and then making a conscious decision. What's the appropriate spend for that? What can you turn around and justify in week 4 or week 2 after the breach, right? What do you want to be able to say? I assess the risks as, $100 million, and I felt that spending $2 million a year in security around that entire apparatus was appropriate to the risks that I understood. Now, if you're wrong, you made a call, right?
Mhm.
Well, there's also, I think, very little evidence to show whether you were right or not. But still, it's insurance. That's what insurance is, right? The
Yeah.
policy for
You're
It's a
operating with
choice.
some assumptions, and that you're
Yeah.
going to list them out, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth. You would think that it's pretty easy to have that kind of a straightforward conversation, even just to brainstorm it. But I've been on the other side of the customer equation. I can attest to what you're sharing with us, Miguel. It is not
Challenge.
easy. It's not trivial to have those conversations. You're going to need to have them over and over again. And so I would love to pick your brain about what you think is like the biggest barrier there, because it's a price, the financials, but it has to be something deep seated in like this refusal to just acknowledge reality. I want to get your take on it.
Well, I think part of it too. I'm going to jump in before Miguel.
Please do.
There's a translation issue within business and between the technical side and the business side. And a lot of times the technical side is speaking their language as to why they need to spend the money and how they're going to utilize that within the technology and the applications or the tool sets that they're going to use. The business here is, I want to spend money. CFO doesn't necessarily correlate that to what it's actually going to do. What we need to help our customers with is that translation from, hey, this is a cyber issue, to this is operational risk. And that's where, Miguel, Ray, and you were talking about this as well. It's that operational risk that CFOs understand and say, okay, in Miguel's example, who in your organization is authorized to make $100 million decision? So if we've said that this is the amount of risk that you're going to carry, that you have to find a treatment for within multiple areas of treatment opportunities that you have at your fingertips, who's going to make that $100 million decision? If somebody says, no, we can't, okay, then let's figure out a way to make a $2 million decision. If that's the way we can do it, now we can start to talk about what processes and tool sets and solutions that we can put in place to treat that risk as much as possible. And, you guys know we're never going to get that risk down to zero. But if we talk about it in the path of operational risk, CFOs understand that. They understand, if it's retail, what is acceptable loss in a store, from theft? If it's financial, what is acceptable loss from fraud? Okay, what is acceptable loss from a cyber incident? Now we can start to have that conversation, and that translation certainly helps with that.
Yeah.
He did an admirable job at that. And that's why I love doing work with him, because like literally it's just throw the ball up and he's going to be able to spike it every time. It's understanding the risk is the most important piece that's there, and then being able to have a good story. So what David was talking about is like, what's an acceptable risk? What is your intolerable risk threshold, right? Like, what is the thing that beyond this we're like, yeah, we're not going to accept that, we're not going to tolerate that, heads are going to roll, whatever the case may be. And I believe that the answer to that question is different depending on how well you prepared. Right. So if you've done everything you were supposed to do, right, everything's configured the right way. Most organizations have things kind of configured right, and they still get breached. Right. Think of every one of these breaches that were there. There was audits that were done. Think about United Healthcare and, the third party that was breached there. Right. So they had an acquisition. The third party that's now under their umbrella was breached earlier this year. I imagine if you went back through and looked from an audit perspective, you're going to find a lot of things that they had done right. Now, what you don't find most people have done is practice for that breach. Right. So it's, if you think about a breach like giving a concert live for the people that you're most impressed by, you want to practice, right? Like, yeah. And you should never feel, hey, I'm 100% ready, right? Like if I were going to have to sing a Prince song to Prince, right? And there are like 100 million people watching it, I'm like, no, I'm not ready, right? Like I'm not. But then if people look back and say, okay, Miguel, what things did you do? Right. Okay. I practiced this much. I had a voice coach. I spent 5 years practicing these things. Right. Like the music is there. Right. I went through and I listened to, and they're like, well, you did every reasonable thing. Yeah. Right. And so now when you start to think about what actually happened, I think that there's going to be two things: what happened and how well did you prepare for that? If you did every reasonable thing, people are going to understand that. Otherwise, they're not going to treat you like the victim of a breach.
Well, and I think that's where, correct me if I'm wrong, is where you come in, right? Where a partner like Armor comes in, because consider that most organizations are not these large conglomerates that have 50 security teams who have this super intelligence, right? Because they've got the money to hire those super intelligent people. Most of them are just IT pros who have other tasks, and they don't have time to practice, right? So where do you get that expertise but someone like Armor, I guess, right?
No, that's 100% right.
Yeah.
Being able to offset their teams is an ability for them to be able to say, and if they don't have a dedicated security team, that's something that we can help and guide them on. Hey, part of that IR plan that you have, who's going to be in charge? What's going to happen? Okay, let's go back to Miguel's response and practice that. But from the perspective of offsetting capabilities, being able to have somebody distill the information and put it into a format that most IT professionals are going to be able to understand and act upon, that's a key component to being able to provide those services and the value out of those services and tool sets that they have.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't think we talk about enough, and we probably should in the future, is security drift. Everybody's always talking about settings drift, or over a period of time the settings change or standards change and we don't keep up with it or whatever. So there's this whole security drift thing that we don't discuss a lot, but like I said, I think we should. But from that perspective, from your experience, if we had to give customers listening in tips, what do you think most orgs get most wrong? Or you're not supposed to talk negatively. What don't they capture effectively in their own assessments?
All right, so I'll start, and I'm sure David will fill in any of the things that I miss. Whenever there's an event, right, any type of an event, and I believe cybersecurity is no different. You're driving down the and you're driving down a highway, and then you see a bunch of cars backed up. First question: what happened? Right? Hey, I wonder what happened there. Right? And what do you, if you really, really want to know, what are you going to want? You're going to want like a video replay of that. Right? So I'm always going to say that, that MDR is going to be important. That's the closest thing to a video replay. Right? And then the next thing is, right, you need to have an incident response plan, right? An incident response team, incident response plan, and then practice. So the things that organizations can automatically do better is that part, right? IR team, IR plan, and the practice, because that's where the remediation comes from. right? So, unless we can automatically remediate with scripts or something along those lines that I know that the Defender has, that gives us the opportunity to do, but we can't do that for every single condition, right? We can create a set of conditions that work and that are reasonable for us to take these actions automatically, and for that, the remediation is pretty much automatic for that. But for everything else, right, it's going to be on the organization to interpret the information correctly, make the right decision, and then actually bring those systems back up online. And I think that's the piece that other organizations don't think about. We're very broad when we think about security, right? It's a very, very broad term and super old example, probably older than most of the people on the call. But security is what President Reagan had around him when he got shot. And assurance is what the Pope had around him when he visited the US, right? So we use security, those terms interchangeably here. And so the expectations change. Right. And when you have a security team, it's really easy to feel like security is your problem. It's your responsibility. And just like you guys were talking about you're going to be going to Chicago next month. And if somebody, you take an Uber from the airport to your hotel, it's not the Uber's responsibility, right? Like they have the authority to pick you up and take you where you're supposed to go, but it's still your responsibility to get there, if it makes sense. And so that's really kind of another gap that I see with some of those teams. Again, speaking super broadly, is just not really understanding how much security depends on their good cybersecurity hygiene, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so as you're empowering and educating your customers, in terms of bolstering their security posture, how do you tackle aspects of like cyber resilience? Is this a concept that you have to introduce to them? Do they have any kind of awareness of it, even vaguely? Like, tell me about that.
It definitely is a concept that we need to augment or adjust their expectations for. And I really like at Gartner earlier this year, the way they put it, we need to move from resilience through adrenaline to resilience through intention. And by being able to have the tool sets in place, being able to understand how they're configured and get away from that security drift, and being able to continually monitor and maintain as well as practice, like Miguel said, now we're coming to a point to where if there is an incident, and we all expect that at some point, no matter how good you are, there will be an incident. You get to the point of run the plan. We put the plan in place. We're confident in the plan. Run the plan. And that'll get us through, instead of the hair on fire approach that most organizations take, because they never look past. It's almost like getting married, but never looking past the wedding to the marriage itself.
Touchy.
Sorry.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by David.
Yeah.
Not a bestseller.
No. What I'm hearing, it's not a handoff, right? It's you're holding their hands. Like that's that's very poetic. Oh, that's
Thank you.
really inspirational.
No, I mean we've always talked about shared responsibility models when it comes to cloud services. We need to help our customers better understand what those shared responsibilities look like when it comes to security as well. They can't hand off all their problems and say, look, you're the security company, you get to do everything. You're like, no, there is a responsibility for you here. And when we understand and are able to practice the handoffs, those are the opportunities that we have to make the organizations more resilient. Because when something does happen, we don't have to waste time going, hey, what should happen? Who should do what? It is just I'm here, you're there. This is the handoff. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah. No, I love it, because there is this misconception that it's a handoff, like just it's now in your scope of control, figure it out for us. But like John Mulaney has this joke, everybody's going to have to get real cool with a bunch of stuff real fast, right? Like you have to be able to have the tough conversations about maybe the legacy systems you have deployed in your environment, the VIP accounts that get special treatment that don't need to have certain settings applied to them. Like you need to know the nitty gritty, right? In order to actually, so a handoff is never actually even viable as an idea, because they're not, unless they're truly sharing with you, opening the curtains for you. You need to build that trust. So that's going to be so crucial.
Somebody needs to ask that question though, right? And then David will ask that question. If I happen to be there, then I'm like, okay. And what are you willing to pay to maintain that freedom? Right? Because I want to look at what the spend is and the risk justification as it relates to that. And so much of this has to do with decisions that are made, strategic decisions that are made, right? Like you get at the highest levels, right? You can make a decision that makes certain outcomes and you're incompatible with those outcomes. So I don't think it's just one message. And I think where we get tripped up in the industry is we think we only have one message. We've got security practitioners, which is one message. And then you have kind of like the security professional. And then you kind of have like the decision makers, the finance CEO, board of directors. And these, I think you get three messages that are there. One is highly technical. And then we stress our CEOs down to like a, 1 micron thin with what we expect of them, right? You need to know every port, every protocol, every technology, all the IT systems, all this risk, no budget. And then you're going to be the first person we blame whenever something goes wrong. They'll be like, "Hey, this is why we hired a CISO," and go, right? And don't tell them that everything that you wanted to do, we said no, right? Like don't say that because that we don't want to hear that. And so there's so much of a challenge in getting people to say, okay, this is our system that we have in place right here. What do we value that system? We've got an online platform that we're using as a storefront. It's not really connected to our business systems. And how much is that worth to us, right? From a value standpoint, what's the reputational losses to us if that ends up being down for a year, 6 months, to whatever, 2 weeks? And okay, so you've assessed it there, and I'm comfortable with whatever number you have. If you can articulate it, passes that sniff test, that smell test, great. Now, if that particular portal is creating a certain amount of risk for you, making it more likely that a bad outcome is going to happen, I want to if I'm the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, I want to pass that decision to somebody above me, right? Because the Security and Exchanges Commission, they're suing people, right? Why do we know Timothy Brown's name, right? Like, why do we know his name? Like, I don't want to be sued. And we've got CISOs that are starting to have these conversations. I want to be able to shift that to the board. And I said, I gave them 2 different courses of action based on how they perceived risk. If I can turn this into a risk decision, that it can be articulated at the board level and they say, no, we understood that there was going to be a breach and we assessed that it was going to take us 10 days to mitigate that and to come back online. And it was worth paying the amount of money that we paid, right? Now, to go from 10 days to 5 days was going to be double the cost, right? And if we went from 5 days to 30 days, it was going to be half the cost. So, we made this decision based on that. And then it becomes like every other financial decision that an organization makes, right? When people make, financial fiscal type decisions and things don't work out, you start to look at what was the thought process at that time. What tools did you apply, right? It's like, hey, yeah, we got money over here. And, we had stocks that we bought back in order to mitigate the financial risks associated with the economic times. People's like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. That makes a lot of sense to me. I did go to business school, but not everybody did. And so it was like, oh yeah, that sounded really good, right? That guy's really smart, right? I should ask him what stocks to buy. See how that changes the context now of what that conversation is. Whoever's speaking during a breach, after a breach, has to be able to speak with that same kind of absolute confidence that you see the director of the Federal Reserve talking about when you're talking about fiscal and monetary policy. All right, I'm jumping off my soapbox now, right? Like I'm done. It broke.
I
need to lose 10 pounds.
Like, sign me up for your courses. Like, teach me all. I was loving it.
Do you have a YouTube channel? Ray will be there immediately after this.
No, I don't. Not yet.
All right.
Maybe we should.
We should talk about. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I hesitate to do this, but we always do this these days. I have to do it because I work for Microsoft. What are your customers doing and what's their challenges, or at least their thought process around, I want to say AI adoption, but I want to target very specifically the security of AI adoption. Because I think you're talking about CISOs, you're talking about, execs, they leaf through whatever they leaf through. I don't know where they're at, maybe on a plane, maybe on the toilet. I don't know. But they find these things about AI and we've got to do this. These businesses, they're beating us on this stuff. And then security seems to be kind of the last part of that discussion, which to me, anyway. But how are you finding the customers that you're working with? Is it because we have the Copilots, we have ChatGPT, we have all those other AI services that exist out there? Where are your customers at in this journey, I guess?
A lot of our customers are in the same boat. They're reading the information. They want to be able to utilize it. They're hearing all of the great benefits of AI. Gen AI is going to be able to make us new revenue streams. It's going to be able to create efficiencies and save us all kind of monies. And that's where the thought process seems to go first. And like you said, security is an afterthought. A lot of what we'll hear is customers, and the customers that we talk to, the question is, are you looking to prepare for the use of AI or protect against the use of AI? And whether a lot of them, when they start to think about the question, will realize that it's actually both, but they don't know where to start. So our position is to not start with AI itself, but let's start with data security, because AI is simply utilizing the data that it has access to. So if we look at Copilot for M365, it's a great tool to be able to utilize, but you have to ensure that the proper labeling is put into place, the proper classification, the proper roles and permissions are in there. Otherwise, you get some low-level employee being able to query what the CEO makes and the entire benefits package of the executive board. Is that information that they should have access to? Probably not. Is there HR information across SharePoints that they probably don't need to have unfederated access to? No, they should actually have controls over that. So customers don't understand, data securities and data governance has been around for as long as security has, but companies have not necessarily had a reason to go out and spend money to do that. Now, all of a sudden, AI has pushed that to the forefront. And that's really the biggest component is we have the ability to do both for our customers to prepare for and protect against the use of AI by ensuring that their data is secure. Hey, let's figure out where your data is. Let's start there. Let's start with labeling and classification. Let's start with roles and permissions, who should have access. And now we can start to look at the use cases that you want to be able to utilize AI for. But then you start to chip away a little bit more. Do you want them to use all AI? Well, what do you mean? Do you want your financial data out on ChatGPT? What? No. So those are the things that we start to talk about. And now we realize that we can utilize the tools to be able to ensure that they have a strong adoption of AI to do what they want it to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the important thing to highlight there. Data security, data governance has never been the sexy thing. Nobody wanted to be that person. Of course, on our show, it's Brody. Brody is the data security person. I'm not saying he's not sexy. I'm just saying, yeah. But as part of this AI tour that I'm part of here at Microsoft, I regularly talk to customers as part of that and talking about AI, and they're, what do we do about data security? So they're definitely interested in it now, but they've had a chance to do it for the past 5-10 years. It's just now like you said, it's become more the opportune thing. And the tools have been there, right? It's just now you have to go back and kind of learn all of these tools and learn how to do it, because I think a lot of organizations, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that had deployed things like SharePoint, they just felt like SharePoint just kind of took care of that data classification and data security for them. But there's data everywhere. Every person in that organization does what the heck they want with their own data, and it doesn't
absolutely
reside everywhere.
Well, and then you start to get into the data lifecycle management component of it, where you're going into DLP processes. But this is where, to toot Microsoft's horn here for a second, the great thing about the Microsoft tool sets is the interoperability to go from Purview with data classification, labeling, and finding the data out to the AI hub within it, the Defender for Cloud Apps, being able to say, hey, I don't want them to use this AI, but I do want them to be able to utilize Copilot, things of that nature. When we can do it across tool sets that are already working together, it makes life for our customers a whole lot easier than it does having to do third-party point solutions and try to make it interoperable.
Yeah. Identity, permissions, I mean, all those things you have a lot of control over. And with that being as close to the operating system as it is, right, then we can start to give people more assurance about the plan that they have, and at least more visibility, right? There's already more information out there than most people can consume in order to make good decisions. And so AI is just going to take everything and make it that much faster. So you've got to be prepared for that. It's a race car and you don't even drive, right? So what are we talking about here, right? Like you have a hard enough time with your bicycle, right? Now you want to buy like a 500 horsepower sports car and go 200 miles an hour, and like, hey, we got to talk about a lot of different things here, right? Especially the fact that if an adversary lands and is able to compromise permissions and identities, which they do trivially, right? Mm-hmm. It's trivial for them. And then what are you going to do? You're going to just hand them the Encyclopedia Britannica of whatever they want to do in Copilot and then just let them run rampant, right? That's effectively what it is you're saying. So when think about how this is going to work when it breaks, right? So that's, when David says everything and it's all polished and it sounds nice, right? And it's all there, I just come in like, with the hammer, start breaking things, right? What happens, right? Because at the end of this, when things go wrong, your customers are not going to accept the answer, I didn't know. It's going to sound like weaponized incompetence, right? And so you don't want that. You want to be able to say, we made choices. These are the choices. It made sense. And here's why it made sense. As long as the decisions are defensible and they understand what that is, I mean, the executives, they're not going to have a problem if they can speak to a level where they can say, this is the decision and this is why we made it. And this is how much we thought it was going to cost. And based on, like our governance, right? Like how we do what we do on the GRC side of the house, we anticipated we'd be able to solve it during this period. A very different answer than we were getting from United Healthcare, right? And they're 2 weeks into it and like, yeah, well, we don't know. We don't anticipate it's going to be solved today, right? And did anybody reading that has probably used United Healthcare in the past feel like, I really feel like they've done everything they were supposed to do? Like, this has inspired confidence in my healthcare and my records. No, no, not at all. This is how we do it, right? To have those difficult conversations, getting the right people in the room, and then making sure that once this is all said and done, give them an opportunity to practice, right? That's why these tabletop exercises attended by executives are so important. Right. I've had the opportunity to see that, have a chairman, have the entire board in the room, CEOs in the room. What do I do when this happens? Who do I call? Right. And in this case, it was a he. Hey, you know what? You're a security person, your compliance person, both in the room. So you can call either one of us, right? Because the first call we make is going to be to the person you didn't call. So don't worry about that. Call whoever you remember to call. We'll figure the rest of it out. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. Right. What am I going to say? And then really walking them through. Here's what you're going to say. Here's how you're going to say that. If that CEO or whoever your public relations person sounds polished and that information sounds, again, like reasonable, there's not going to be any issues.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I feel like we kind of need to do this since it is toward the end of the show. So we'll go back and forth here. What is your favorite color?
Blue. Your favorite color is David? Why, thank you.
What is your quest?
My quest.
To make a meaningful difference in the cyber war.
There it is.
I like that. And what is the airspeed of an unladen swallow?
Well, I don't know. Is that European or African?
So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate this. It's been an awesome discussion. And I learned a lot about each of you, but also about your company. If you could think of, or at least put together a concise idea, what's like the top 2 or 3 things you would want our listeners and watchers to know about Armor, about your company?
Number one, come visit us.
Okay.
Website is armor.com. The point of coming to visit us is to engage in that meaningful conversation about cybersecurity, about understanding your risk, and about how to go about treating as much of that risk as possible through the solutions and services that Armor provides, along with our partnership with Microsoft.
Right. And I'll add one thing to that. I think some of our competitors are willing to do that as well. And what we're going to do a little bit differently is we're going to put like dollar signs around that and ask you some of those difficult, atmospheric questions about that risk, so that when you're starting to make a decision between I have choice A and choice B, that you have the same tools available to you that your organization does in managing monetary and fiscal risks. Right. So if we can make those things more parallel for you, then that conversation becomes that much more portable. So if you're a CISO and you need to take that message to the CEO and to the board, definitely talk with us. We have a way to talk about these things that will allow you, it's going to open more doors, right, for you. And it gives you a good, reasonable way to talk about risk in a way that will go anywhere you need it to go.
Building that business case is so crucial. When you have technical folks even asking about it, like, that it's serious, unintended. You're inviting folks to come visit you, but will you be in attendance at Ignite?
Yes, we will.
Okay, all right.
We'll be at Ignite.
And you.
No, we got to make sure. I know you guys talked about doing the show live.
Yeah.
At least got to make sure we connect.
Well, so here's the other thing. We're trying to work out what we're going to do there. So we're definitely doing the show that Monday evening because we have a guest already scheduled. But during the week, we're planning on doing some show segments, just some impromptu stuff. We would be happy to stop by and chat with you all again.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Wonderful.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you don't know your booth number yet, so we can't give that out because I don't want to go into my own little soapbox about Ignite planning, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer to all that stuff, right? So,
There you go.
But yeah, we'd love to know, and maybe we can share that maybe in a future episode as we get closer to Ignite, where all of our partners will be. So that would be great.
Nice.
But anyway, yes, absolutely appreciate you all being on. It's been wonderful. Ray, did you have something you wanted to share?
Only my deep appreciation. Thank you, Miguel and David. This has been extraordinary. I feel so much more enlightened, and I don't feel attacked for not driving. And maybe I have a tough time with my bicycle. Okay, and also divorce commentary. That's fine. But I'll drive a partner crazy. It's fine. You got.
Now you've put so much into the show at the end that people are going to have to go back and listen to tie all that together. They didn't
Nice.
even know. They glossed over. They had no idea what they were talking about, and now they have to go back. I appreciate that. That's really good marketing.
Well
good job, Ray. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Once again, we'll be back next week. Who do we have next week, Ray? Do you know? You remember?
Rod.
I'm
This is Rod's schedule. He's very serious about this person.
You know who we have next week? Another Microsoft partner.
Yes.
Who is it? Who is it?
Red Canary.
Red Canary. There you go. Red Canary's been on a couple times before. So Red Canary's on next week as well. Another MISA partner. So people can tune in for that. It'll be a good discussion. I don't know if I should say it, but our prep call with Red Canary was not as good as yours, but it was still pretty good.
Rodney,
You can say that.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
for sure say that. You can absolutely say that. I want to raise the bar. If we can have better conversations all the way around, let's raise the bar. Why not?
We should have celebrity death match, have all the partners on in different squares and what?
Don't worry, everybody. Rod poked fun at divorce, dying as a cat lady. This is how you know Rod loves you. If he makes his little digs. So thank you so much.
If I kick you in the shins, you're part of the crew. So yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.